tell the people already that the publishing house is going to print the Bible?
Thank you.
The Word Project? Yeah, it's a nice translation. There's some tweaks that have to be done, but I know a few of the men that are doing it. I was talking to one of them. One of them was a classmate for a while, and it's a good we used it during Lent. That's what we use for the Passion history. And it must be okay, because after one of my grandkids came to me and said, you know, I actually understood it this time.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to do. I mean, when you look at Bible translation, you don't want to aim for people who are with college education. It's kind of like my sermon. I have some thing inside my word processor where I can grade it. What grade do you think my sermons are written?
Fourth.
I must have told you that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a repeat.
They're down.
Oh, no, I just knew that.
There's the door.
Okay, we're going to talk about government. We don't have to give that to Dave. We're going to look at Romans 13. Paul writes, everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who are doing right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and he will commend you. For he is God's servant to do you good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, an agent of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also because of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes. For the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to government. Give everyone what you owe him. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. All right. A couple of questions along the way here. First one here. What is St. Paul telling us about the governments when he tells us that the authorities that exist have been established by God? And then why was it especially important that the Christians in Rome be reminded of this? And why is it a reminder important for us as well? How about the first one there? What's he saying when he says every authority that exists has been established by God?
God put them there.
Which government?
Whatever.
Democracy?
Whatever government you are under.
Whatever government you're under. So whether it's communism, whether it's good, whether it's bad, God put them there for a reason. What about the second one? Why was it especially important for Christians in Rome to be reminded of that? What do you know about the Roman government?
They considered themselves top.
Were they a good government?
No.
Well, they might have been worldly, but they persecuted the Christians.
Sure they did. They made life tough for Christians. And to be reminded, God put them there for a reason. Let's talk about the United States of America. Oh boy, how much government bashing do you hear? Who has heard our government being bashed? Everybody has, right? How many of us have bashed the government? I'm guilty of it too. It's a sin. Why? What's Paul reminding us here?
God put that.
God put him there. You may not like the President of our United States. God has him there for a reason. All right. So, remember, they are God's representative, right? So, if you are bashing the government, who are you really bashing?
Yourself.
God.
You're bashing your God. So think about that the next time you read. I was just reading some last night. Someone got off on some government tangent on this forum I was at, and oh my goodness, I'm sure the FBI is keeping track of all the things that were said. Shouldn't be. Do I agree with President Obama? I'll admit it, no, I do not. President Obama walked down the stairs and came down here. He is still the president of our country. He gets our respect, he gets our honor. Does that mean I'm going to remain silent? No, I'm going to tell him what I think on some things. But you do it with respect. And I think of all the times we are guilty of bashing the government. We do that, you're bashing your God. I've been guilty of it. I'm sure you have too. All right, how about second one? The government is God's servant to do you good. God has also established the church in earth for our good. Explain the roles and responsibilities of the church and the state. What limitations has God placed in those roles and responsibilities? A lot of times you hear about the separation of church and state. That's probably not a good way to put it. What is the role of the government?
Rule the nation. To rule the nation or
To
defeat
rule the
them.
nation. What about for you as a citizen?
Keep law and order.
Keep law and order, protect you. Everything is physical. That is what the government is for, your physical well-being. What's the role of the church? Why are we here?
Your spiritual well-being.
We are here to preach the gospel. He does not tell us to legislate authority, to make laws, does he? Probably a good way to look at roles of government and church. Each have their own role they're supposed to carry out. It is not the government's duty to preach the gospel. God did not give them that authority. He did not give us the authority to rule the country, did he? So where does that fit as a Christian?
We obey both.
Okay, we obey both. Don't get confused on what each is supposed to do. And you see it mixed up so much in government, and you see it in churches. Governments want to bring in God all the time, don't they? Wasn't it in the 50s with the, what do you call it? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God.
Well, it was
That was not in there until the 50s. I think it was the 50s, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
And then people want to take it out, and they get all bent out of shape. Is it the government's job to preach gospel? No. It's not their job.
But they should not be there to hinder it from being preached.
Right. They gave us freedom. We are free to preach the gospel, aren't we? And we're thankful that we live in a country under a government that does allow us to do that. We get to talk about a government here without being afraid of going to jail. I'm not worried I'm going to end up in this jail cell this afternoon because someone saw this video online. Because we're talking about the government. I don't have to worry about that. I can preach Jesus Christ. And I don't have to worry about being thrown overboard on a boat, which happened in the Mediterranean this last week. We are free to share the gospel. Some countries you can't do that. There are some countries, if I come up to you and say, let me tell you about Jesus, I'm going to be executed. Because that is against the law of the state. Of course, if you ask me about Jesus, I can answer your question, but I can't initiate it. That's different. I mean, when in Rome, you've got to live under Roman rule. You come to the United States, you live under the U.S. laws. And that law says you are free to worship. And so we don't want to abuse that. Some churches have. They try to tell the government what to do. Of course, government likes to have, they like to hang something over your head. We were reminded of this at our conference last week. I cannot tell people how to vote. What happens if I do? What happens if I get up on Sunday morning and say, you should vote for President Obama in the next election?
Hopefully we don't have to worry about it.
What happens if I do that?
You can be arrested for that, can't you?
No, I won't get arrested.
No.
Our church loses its tax exempt status. And we have to pay taxes there. We can say, we can be neutral. We cannot point to one candidate or the other. If to allow anything in the church, get these come election time too. Some of them I do not put out because I can't. There's some that I can. And what it'll say is, okay, this is the topic of abortion. And then it lists all the candidates who are for it, who are against. Or raising taxes. It'll say who's for it, who's against it. Doesn't side with anybody. But it's completely neutral, it's supposed to be. Those I'll put up. And I don't have to worry about losing tax exempt status. And, I mean, think about what that means. If we have to pay taxes, what we can do. I mean, that's a blessing that God gives to churches, or our government gives to churches in our country. But let's not mix up the two. Anyways, I don't want to get off on too much. Yeah.
God comes first, though. He's right.
Yep. Well, we're going to talk about that one in just a minute. All right, on the flip side, number 3. According to verse 4, what right has God given the government, and how does that serve for our good? What insight concerning the governmental right do we gain from Genesis 9:6? Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. So first of all, go back to verse 4. What right has God given the government? Verse 4, he says, for he is God's servant to do you good, but if you do wrong, be afraid. For he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, and he is the grant to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. What right has God given to the government?
Punish the wrongdoer.
Punish the wrongdoer. To what extent? How far can they go in punishment?
Far.
They are allowed to use capital punishment. How does that serve our good?
As a curb.
Sure, the law is a curb, isn't it? You think about it, if I shoot somebody and they die, and they slap me on the wrist, think it's going to stop me from shooting somebody else? You get pulled over for drunk driving, and police officer says, no, 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 you shouldn't do that, and you go away, or you get a $50 fine, and then you hear about the guy who's been pulled over 10 times. What do you need to do? You don't want to drunk drive in Germany.
You never drive again.
You will never drive again. You lose your license for life. So maybe we need to do that. Does it deter punishment? People like to use capital punishment as a good example. They say it doesn't deter punishment. I think part of the problem is guys sit on death row for 35 years. If there's too many appeals, right? If they did it like some of these other governments, where you get caught on Monday and by Friday you're dead. Going to make you think twice about robbing that bank and shooting the teller? Yeah. So our government has the right to do it. Doesn't mean they have to. People get all bent out of shape when Minnesota takes away capital punishment. I'll be honest with you, I didn't get too bad out of shape. The government has the right to do it, doesn't mean they have to. And I look at all the flaws that our judicial system has, I can see the point. Some guy just got let out of jail after spending 35 years in death row. And the only reason he was on death row is the prosecutor was ambitious, wanted to make a name for himself, disregarded the evidence, and they didn't have any evidence. The guy was tried and convicted in a week. And the attorney, interesting enough, has apologized for what he did.
He was innocent?
Was that?
He was innocent?
He was innocent. 2 other guys did it. And evidence finally came out. The only thing that irritates me with the whole thing is when he was let out of jail, state law where he was says he's supposed to get $330,000 for being wrongfully in prison. They aren't giving it to him. I don't remember the reason why. But it's just, you know, there's one, yeah, have we mistakenly executed innocent people? I'm sure we have. But government has the right to do it. And, you know, you look at the way that we execute people, lethal injections under big scrutiny here because the guy suffered a little bit. My sympathy goes so far. I mean, if you want, go back to the firing squad. That's quick, it's painless. I mean, it's done. Of course, I have heard of people that went through the firing squad and lived.
Then it wasn't painless.
Was that?
Then it wasn't painless.
Well, not for this guy. He was shot 8 times, and the head of the guards actually pulled a gun and shot him in the head. And he lived.
Hard hit.
Must have been. Or the guy who hangs and doesn't die. Anyways, where are we here? So, governments should do these things to protect their citizens. Kind of leads to number 4. What happens to law and order in a country when the government doesn't use the power of the sword God has given? Unfortunately, we're seeing it too much in our country right now. They are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. Do you have law and order? Look at Ferguson.
Somebody gets by with it, I can't do that.
Sure. And of course you wonder sometimes, everybody's videotaping everything now. You probably heard about it, if you've seen the video of the police officer that the guy called in and said he took my taser, and so he shot him 8 times. And somebody happened to be filming it all. Oops. It happens. When you don't see people following the laws, whether it's the government themselves or whatever, you're going to have problems.
I have a question. The news media, are they sometimes substituting themselves as the law?
We have video proof of these things. Well, video proof doesn't always tell you
I'm
everything.
thinking of the Ferguson case, as you
Sure.
discussed it. I don't know if you read the article, but the evidence that was given to the courts was printed in the Free Press, what the guy wrote, what really happened. The victim of the shooting was unarmed, supposedly, but he made an attempt to grab the gun. In fact, there's evidence that in getting the gun, he was shot in the arm or
Sure, and he had the gun residue on his hand. His DNA is found inside of the car.
Yes.
Blood was found inside of the car.
and yet, in the eyes of the news media, he's completely innocent.
You saw the same thing, and the news will twist things.
Yeah.
when there was that shooting of that black young man in Florida,
Yeah.
what picture did you see in the news? You saw him as a smiling 12-year-old boy. Then finally they showed what he really looked like now. He's not that smiling young boy. They put who they want out there. The news, I'll be honest with you, I read 10 different papers, most of them online. I read everything from the ultra-conservative to the ultra-liberal. My favorite newspapers are from Europe and the Mideast. Because they don't care. They aren't influenced by sources here where somebody says, you can't print that. Well, they do. So if you want to get a nice rounded viewpoint, read Al Jarrad. Oh, what is it? It's an Arabic newspaper, printed in English. They aren't all worried if they're going to offend Congress. They aren't worried if they're going to offend the president or what. It's not that they're blasting him, but you get a side where it's a nice medium, middle. You listen to CNN, boy, you're going to get the liberals. Listen to Fox, you get the conservatives. You got to find they report what they want you to hear.
They want to get that first news out so that I'm the head of everybody. And
Sure.
whether it's right or wrong.
How many of you remember seeing the Korean War on TV? Any of you see the Korean War on TV? What was the first war you saw on TV? Vietnam, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You start getting reports. Walter Cronkite. Now, you have news 24/7. Think about it. I don't care where you go in the world, they're flashing the news the moment it happens. And if the TV cameras aren't there, somebody's got it on their cell phone. Or they're sending out all these tweets about it. And you got to take everything with a little bit grain of salt. And it's kind of like church catches on fire right now. Some of you head out that door. Some head out that door. Maybe not everybody gets out. So at the end, the police officer asks you, what happened? Well, those who went out that door are going to have one viewpoint. Those who go out that door are going to have another viewpoint. And they may sound totally different. You know, those going out there will say, kitchen burned up. Person out here will say, I didn't see the kitchen burn. And so who's right? You've got to put it all together, don't you? But I think the news media has not helped law officers, has not helped government. Look at how much the news media bashes government. How about the comedians? Late night comedian.
Yeah.
At least Johnny Carson was nice about it. Anyways, I got off. How about 5? Explain the 2 reasons for obedience Paul mentions in verse 5. Verse 5, he says, therefore it is necessary to submit to the authorities not only because of possible punishment, but because of conscience. 2 reasons why you want to submit to them.
Get caught, you get punished.
I get caught, I'm going to get punished. What's the other thing?
God says you should.
Yeah, your conscience plays into it, doesn't it? Think of the curb of the law. You know, think about it. If you are not doing anything wrong, what do you have to worry about when you see a police officer?
Nothing.
Nothing. How many of you, when you're driving down 14, you have your cruise control set at 65, and you see the red flashers behind you? What's the first thing you do?
Check your speed.
You check your speed. Why? You set the cruise control, you knew it was at 65.
Subconsciousness tells you, maybe I'm going a little fast.
I might be going a little too fast. So what if you're doing 66? police will say, well, we'll give you a little cushion because your speedometer might not be right. Follow the law. Law says 65, you're doing 66, you should get a ticket. Yeah,
Also, if the lights are behind you, you're supposed to get off the road.
you're
so
supposed to
that
get
they
off
can
on the side, yeah.
Get going.
And you always start thinking, or every once in a while, communities will do this. They pull over people. And I'm not saying they did anything, and what they're doing is rewarding people for good driving. They pull them over and they give them a gift certificate to McDonald's and say, thank you for yielding to that car back there. Of course, you're sweating
Yeah.
bullets, aren't you? You're pulled over and you see that man walking up to your car and you're thinking, what did I do? Right? And, but if you didn't do anything wrong, why were you? But God also gives conscience too. All right. Number 6. In Acts 5, Peter and the apostles were ordered by the Sanhedrin to stop preaching about Jesus Christ. We're told Peter and the other apostles replied, we must obey God rather than men. What do they mean?
God comes first.
Hmm?
God comes first.
God comes first. But he also put the government there. Why did Peter and John say, forget it? We are not going to listen to the government. Why? What did the government tell them?
Not to preach.
Do not preach the gospel. What did God tell you to do?
Preach the
He
gospel.
told you to preach the gospel. So Peter and the other apostles says, we understand you are the government, you are God's representative, but you are telling us to do something against God's word. So we're saying no. So if the government tells you to break God's word, respectfully say no. Which kind of leads to number 7. Evaluate. Because the government of the United States allows and funds abortions, Christians have the right to withhold taxes and to, even at times, disobey the government.
We need to pay our taxes.
But people will say, I'm not going to pay my taxes because it funds abortion.
We need to speak up. That law
Okay.
should be changed.
Does the government demand abortion?
No, it
Does
allows.
it demand
It allows it.
to take life? No. It's not telling you you have to. China does. China says you can have one child. Any other child must be put to death. Hmm?
Not what I heard.
It's changed, hasn't it?
I think it's
The law has changed now or
Yeah.
whatever, but it,
The
at one time
government
it
will only
didn't.
support one child. That's what it is.
It used to be, I think you're right, they are changing. It used to be in China, if you got pregnant with a second child, you had to have an abortion, the government made you. That's when you turn and say, I must obey God rather than men. Because they're demanding you to do it. They aren't demanding you to have an abortion in our country. But like you said, what do we do as Christians then? Not pay taxes? What does the last part of Romans 13 say? If you owe taxes, pay them. I mean, you paid taxes last week. April 15th. If you owe revenue, you pay it. We pay our taxes. So what do we do about the government funding abortions?
We talked to our
You
representatives.
talk to them. When the marriage amendment came up, I had heard from some source that it was going to be coming up in the next week or so for legislation. So I wrote our senators, not as a pastor, as a citizen, part of their constituency. And I said, I am concerned about this. These are the reasons I am against why I am for one man and one woman. I heard back from one of the senators. She wrote me back a nice letter saying, thank you for your letter. I understand what you're saying. It's not going to come up this year. We have to worry about the budget first. I'll keep your views in mind if it comes up next year.
You tell,
It came up a week later. I wrote her back and I said, you lied to me. I knew it was coming up and you're telling me you didn't? And she did not take my views into consideration, one bit. But I let her know about it.
Did she respond to this one?
My second one,
Yeah.
I wrote her again, when I was having a debate about transgender and the locker rooms.
yeah.
I said, this is what I think about it. Oh, don't worry about it. Comes time for election, I'm going to start mentioning some names. And not as a pastor. I will do it as a citizen of Blue Earth County of Minnesota. And I will do what I can to make sure she does not get elected, because she does not represent my neighborhood. I've talked to my neighbors and they don't
Profoundly impacted.
They don't agree with it either. Anyway, can you protest?
Oh, yeah.
Peacefully, you should
Peacefully.
be able to,
Peacefully. There, you don't see it quite as much as you used to, but protesting around abortion clinics. The law says now you have to be so far away, which I can understand. Because the problem comes, some people are not doing it peacefully. They're blowing up the building. Or they're hurling stuff at the people. That's not a peaceful thing. I think of Martin Luther King Jr. Was he violent? No. I didn't hear his answer.
yes, you
The
said
little
no.
one, says yes.
Sorry, you didn't live at that time. Actually, he promoted peace, didn't he? He did not want violent protests. Do it peacefully. We don't rebel against the God-given authority. Some people stepped out of bounds. You see that today too? You know, you get to some people, some churches have really, you get to the separation of church and state. Church not doing what they're supposed to. I think of this church, I can't think of where it is right offhand. If a military person dies, they protest it. Because they basically say that soldier promoted homosexuality. And so they will protest at funerals. Have you ever heard of Patriot Guard? Patriot Guard is a bunch of motorcyclists that if the family of a veteran requests them, they will come and hold a flag outside the church and at the cemetery. I'm a member of the Patriot Guard. What they do is, if there's a funeral, they will stand out there, they won't say anything. All they do is just stand there in honor of that military person. Family has to ask them.
Oh,
They just
do?
don't show up. Was
It's
that?
on the one in the boy from Wasika that was killed a year or so ago in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He lived across the road from my mother. And my mom said the family hadn't asked for it, and they came. The whole street, about a block and a half, was lined with the motorcycles and then up at the church and that. But she had understood they hadn't asked, they just came, so.
Typically, the rules are, you don't show up unless they ask you. And they've been used a few times against that one church, where they basically say, can you come? Because we know they're going to protest this funeral. Can you kind of block them? And they will. I haven't been involved in that one case. All right, you got any questions? Thanks for coming. Didn't mean to get so long-winded here. know it doesn't answer every question about government, but at the same time, they're God-given representatives. We bash them a lot. Ask God to forgive you the times you bash the government. Doesn't mean you have to like what they do. We have peaceful ways to get around it. You can vote. You get the opportunity.
I think we can speak disfavorably to certain things that the government is doing. But
Where people cross the line is when you start showing disrespect
disrespect, yeah.
and you start showing dishonor. Can you do these things respectfully? Yes, you can. President Obama came down here. I would be very respectful to him. I would tell him where I stand on a few issues and where I don't like he does, but it's always going to be out of respect because he is our president. Anything else? We'll close with the prayer that we have here. Gracious God, thank you for the country in which we live. Bless those men and women who govern this land and lead me to give them the honor and respect your representatives deserve. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. We have a good day now.